Do you see any change being possible with the current political system the way it is? Do you think there is any way to actually overcome the current status quo that we're seeing? Because it feels almost impossible. Like I remember what you said, earlier in the show. It feels like you're talking to a wall sometimes. It's very true. Do you think there's any way of opening their minds and saying, "Hey, you need to do something"? Because I feel like I said, it feels like they're all in on it, and
Yeah.
it's wasting our breath many times.
No, no, you won't convince them. In fact, I argue in the book that I'm writing now. I argue basically that the welfare state is the first deep state. I mean, if you define the deep state as the controlling millions, the private lives of millions of people who are not criminals, then the welfare state is the original deep state. But no, the other thing I argue in the book that I've written this before in several magazine articles in Chronicles magazine last year. Basically, there's two. We've abdicated our citizenship to two groups of people: functionaries and lawyers, bureaucrats and lawyers. They are the people. They are the professional surrogate citizens who take control of our citizenship. They do our citizenship for us. We pay them to do our citizenship. We have farmed out our citizenship to lawyers and to functionaries. And until we take that back from those two groups and break their power by assuming responsibility for ourselves, we can't do it. And that's absolutely imperative today. Is to break that power of these professional citizens. A good example. Let me give you a concrete example of that. One of the problems the problem we have on the right. The other institution, the one institution that ordinary citizens, non-professional citizens, amateurs like you and me, real citizens, all real citizens are amateurs, unlike the lawyers and the bureaucrats are professionals, but the rest, real citizens, are amateurs. Well, what was the one forum, the one organization that amateurs had to express their outrage when things became tyrannical? The answer to that is churches. Churches were the place where citizens spoke out. And they would, under the leadership of clergy. The clergy would, for all of his faults, and he had many, Martin Luther King was probably the last example of that. But there have been many over the course of Western history. Churchmen who stood up, leading the people, and Wurmbrand in Romania, or Mindszenty in Hungary under communism. I mean, these were churchmen who stood up in times of injustice, like communism or segregation or Nazism or whatever. And they stood up and they pointed their finger at the civil magistrates, the civil authorities, and said, "You are abusing your authority. You are trampling on God's turf." And they would, the people would follow them. So churches were the way, and it's not like pastors should be and clergy should be, political ideologues, and they shouldn't be peddling political ideologies. But when things are really awful, they should be the ones who stand up and exercise leadership, like Dr. King did. Well, what happened to those churches today? They've been eclipsed. And who have they been eclipsed by? Conservatives are endlessly complaining, don't they? The left wants to banish religion from the public sphere. They want to banish Christianity from the left hates religion. The left hates Christianity. The left hates, religious believers of any kind, especially Christians. But who is it that has eclipsed the churches as voices of public dissent? It is the right-wing Republican conservative law firms. The law firms have taken the role, they've done more than anything to eclipse the role of the churches. The Alliance Defending Freedom, the Family Research Council, the Heritage Foundation, the Liberty Lobby, you name what these are, and some of them do good work. I don't deny it. I work with ADF here in Europe, and I actually admire some of what they do. I admire a lot of what they do. The lawyers here in Europe, at least, are quite good, in my experience, in the ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom. But the fact remains, those law firms, those conservative, quasi-Christian law firms, have stolen, have displaced and replaced the churches as voices of public morality, as consciences and voices of public morality. So they've taken control of our dissent. And that, in a nutshell, shows me, I think, illustrates the problem with the Christian right and the right generally, the conservatives groups. They have abdicated their responsibility to these professional lawyers and sometimes professional bureaucrats. And these firms, where do they come from? They imitated the left. They imitated similar firms on the left. During the 60s, you had these left-wing professional law firms growing up, Common Cause and Amnesty International, and these various left wing law firms, lobbying groups. Well, during the 70s, the right wing started imitating those. Okay, maybe they did some good. Maybe it was necessary. Who knows? But the fact remains, what they did was they displaced the churches and they displaced the citizens. So they're in some ways, the problem, as much as the left-wing groups are. So you can see what we're up against, what ordinary citizens are up against. They've got to take back their citizenship, and because once these law firms, even these conservative law firms, take control of the dissent, they decide what can be said. They can control. They exercise cancel culture as much as the left does. They will cancel views that they don't like as much as at least as viciously as the left will do. And I'm not the only one saying that.
Oh no, absolutely not. You're talking about the power the law firms have, like with the churches. How many of these law firms and attorneys have we seen become lawmakers? We have a lot of these attorneys that have become our lawmakers, and they're the ones that vote and create this legislation that has made this system the way it is. And they tell us, in order to be able to get some solutions, we got to go talk to them. It reminds me of saying, look, if you don't want to be abused anymore, go tell your abuser to stop it because you don't like it anymore. These are people that absolutely 100% knows what's going on, I believe, but they continue to allow it to happen. I'm kind of tired of it, Stephen. I guess I'm just in that space right now trying to figure out, where do we go to next?